Hello again and welcome back. Today I'm going to talk about circles of concern, which is a concept which Stephen Covey brought up in his book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Thanks to Brother Muhammad Jamil for recommending I speak about this one. It's something, this book, 7 Habits, I've read it maybe 7 or 8 times. Every time I read it, I get something else out of it. The circle of concern concept is in the first chapter, Proactivity, or in the first habit, Proactivity. But before we go there, I think it's worthwhile breaking down how the 7 habits are structured. So it's clear when you read the book or listen to the audiobook that Stephen Covey spent a large portion of his life studying and understanding human behavior in terms of habits and the most effective, productive outcomes from particular habits and methods of behavior. The book is not something which you can just sit down and have a casual read of. It's really deep psychologically and on all levels of personal organization, habit formation. It's a very, very deep book and fascinating. That's why I said I had to read it 7 or 8 times to get to my level of understanding now. And I'm sure if I read it again, I'd extract something else from it. So I'll put a diagram on the screen which explains the 7 habits. The first one is, or let's say the first 3, be proactive, begin with the end in mind, and put first things first, are part of what he calls private victory. And I believe this is because these are all internal habits. Habits, let's say you act on by yourself. And prior to these habits is mentioned dependence, because before someone becomes proactive or does the habit 2 and 3, they're dependent. They're in a state of, and this is when we get into the circle of concern, they're in a state where they're dependent on other people. Their lives are just things that are happening to them. Once you get past that private victory, you become independent, or much more independent. That's when you go into the public victories. The public victories are, as you can see on the screen, think, win, win, seek first to understand, then to be understood, synergize, and then you move on to interdependence, which is basically what synergize is all about. So if you sum all of the parts, the answer is greater. 1 plus 1 doesn't equal 2, it equals a number greater than 2, theoretically, because working with other people can bring all sorts of synergies. And then surrounding everything is sharpen the saw. And sharpen the saw, one of the classic examples that Stephen Covey gives in the book is the one who's cutting down the tree shouldn't be too busy cutting down the tree to actually stop and sharpen his saw, because when the saw gets blunt, it's much more difficult for him to cut the tree. So it's better for him to take the time to stop, sharpen the saw, and go back again. And this translates to our habits as well, our day-to-day lives. If we don't take the time to actually refresh spiritually, mentally, physically, and so on, our metaphorical saws will become dull and will become inefficient, ineffective. As I mentioned before, the circle of concern concept is part of habit number 1, which is to be proactive. And again, the private victory, this is something which we work on within ourselves. It's not something that necessarily other people will be interacting with us on. One of the parts of the book that really affected me the most was the part about between stimulus and response is your choice to choose. For me, that's really the definition of personal accountability, knowing that you're not just being acted upon and just flowing down a stream and the water is carrying you like a stick in the stream. You're actually accountable for the decisions you make, whether they're conscious or unconscious. So that power to choose is what we'll talk about later. It effectively expands your circle of influence. So the circle of concern contains those things which we care about and directly affect us. And the circle, or the area of no concern, is the other things that they just don't affect us, that they have no impact on our lives whatsoever. So things of concern could be other people that we work with, our car, our house, our landlord, the weather on that day, anything which could possibly affect us or be of some concern or impact on our lives. So inside everybody's circle of concern is a smaller circle of influence. Inside the circle of influence are the things that you have the power to control and do control. Now, in people that are highly reactive, the circle of influence will be very, very small relative to the circle of concern, because most of their lives are being acted upon. So the things that such people can do things about are much less. Proactive people, and this is what Be Proactive, the habit, is all about, is expanding your circle of influence, making that circle of influence as big as it possibly can be, bounded by the circle of concern. Proactive people focus on things that they can do something about, and most of the time that will be things within themselves. And again, this points to the whole concept of personal victory. Now, reactive people are the type of people that focus in the circle of concern in these areas where they don't necessarily have any direct influence. There's not much they can do about it, or anything they can do about it. These can be things, and mostly are things, such as the weakness of others, if you focus on the weakness of others, or things in the environment around you. So this can lead to blaming, accusing attitudes, reactive language, and feelings of victimization. And these are all things which are mentioned in the book. And this kind of approach causes your circle of influence to shrink within your circle of concern. So Covey goes into a lot more detail here than I am. I'm really skimming over the top of it, but it's absolutely fascinating, how the proactive person, to become proactive, we need to expand that circle of influence relative to our circle of concern. I strongly recommend you start reading the book. It's had a big impact on my life for sure. And hope this video wasn't too long. Let me know what you think in the comments.